thought I would give you my impressions of the Bantang Barracuda. You already have one, so we're not going to dive into a lot of the minutia about this blade. You're familiar with it, right? I don't think we have to get into that. I know I've lamented this type of design before. I think Bantang referred to it as a clean sheet design, which I could only surmise to be related to the fact that this is just kind of a sheet of metal with an edge on it. But I think that for what it is, it's executed very well, and I'm not sure there's a better way to have done what he's kind of done here. It's very thin, right? It's not a very wide blade. I also have the 3.5 Kaiken here. And you'll see, while they are similar, one is definitely more narrow, right? And one of the not necessarily a huge problem, but one of the kind of issues or sticking points I have noticed is with the increased narrowness, right, of the Barracuda. It rolls around in your hand like a pen almost. So if you're not training with this and you're not used to how this rolls in your hand, whereas like this has that sort of knife sort of flap. I'm rolling on from one flat to the next flat to the next flat, right? From one flat to the next flat to the next flat. Whereas a knife that is kind of this square tube, right? It'll roll once and then roll 3 more times successively. Get out of here, shit. So you'll think if you're doing one-handed transitions, or if you're adjusting your grip or something like that, right? If you're doing anything with your one hand and you let this kind of maneuver in your hand, it'll potentially move in a way that will be unexpected for you. Because this is a little tiny stick knife. That's kind of my impression of that. It does not really move like other knives do. And that is, it's both good and bad, right? Because it is very quick in the hands. It's very quick in the hands. Like, yeah, it rolls around in the hand like a pen. That's not necessarily a bad thing if you're used to that, right? If you're used to that, it's a quick little spicy beetle in your hand, right? But if you're not used to that and you're used to the cadence of one flat to the other flat to the other flat, this might be a little much for you, right? It might be a little much. So that's something I've kind of noticed. And so with that said, it's one of the reasons I'm glad they make a trainer. I actually don't have it with me, which I kind of fucked up on that, because I have the sheath clipped to my belt right now, but I don't have the trainer itself. So it's one of the reasons I'm glad they make a true-to-life trainer for it. I can put a picture up of it here. But the trainer is cut very, very similarly. It has identical scales. So you can get used to how it flows in your hand, right? So if you are someone who goes, wow, this knife moves way differently in my hand than a lot of other knives do, you can break that trainer out and you can go to work and train relentlessly without cutting yourself or without cutting someone else, right? Or without risk of damaging your blade, right? So really glad to have a trainer out for that, right? Because especially with esoteric blades, or blades that break away from a certain, very standard methodology, I think you definitely should have trainers out, because it's important to make that accessible for people so people can be safe, right? So anyway, CPM 3V Frosty Satin Finish, 1/8 cut of steel. We have these little notches in here for the Kydex sheath, but I kind of also use them as index notches to know I'm hitting the end of the hitting the end of the scale, right? I know I could just feel the edge of the scale and just say, okay, I'm hitting the end of the scale. But I can just kind of, it's just another index point, right? They're right here. You can see that. Those are for the sheath, but it's another index point for your thumb if you ever do forward grip this, which I think is very viable. I'll introduce the sheath, it's centerline sheath, right? Now, if you carry this if you appendix carry this, right, and you come out, edge in, and you flip edge out forward, that's perfectly viable. I don't know if Bantang himself recommends going edge forward with his Barracuda, but it feels the excuse me, the finger hook, your pinky kind of wraps around that nicely, and your thumb kind of rests in that notch right there, and your finger kind of rests in those notches right there. So I don't know, I feel like this feels really nice right here. Whether that's by design or by simply by, I don't know, serendipity. There it is. So not a lot here, right? Very thin. The tip actually looks quite stout, if I'm being honest. It looks quite stout. I forget what grind this is, but it's pretty aggressive. But it doesn't have that, I guess you'd call that a trailing point like this Kaiken does. Again, pretty similar profile there. This rides low, obviously, because you have that tail hook to make, to take advantage of, which definitely helps carry better. It helps conceal better. The Barracuda is very easy, I feel like, to carry. I really like it for that purpose. I think concealed blades are, in certain circumstances, more useful. And I think if the blade remains hidden up until the last second, the blade doesn't necessarily need to be as big, right? Now, the blade is rather short, depending on who you're facing or who you're targeting. This may not be long enough to reach all vital organs, right? If you're dealing with winter clothing or something like that, or a lot of fatty layers, you might have to do work with this. I prefer an extra inch on this for something in a combative setting, unless you are trained to actually do some pull cuts and kind of open people up, which I think this would excel at quite well. But if you get into this, you get into the Barracuda, you look at this sort of cheese wedge here, you look at how pointy it is, and you go, I want to just kind of stick people with it. Looks like a nice little pointy sticker, right? Stick. I don't know if this has the depth of penetration I would necessarily want if I was going to simply stick people with this, right? So, definitely if you're going to carry this in a defensive situation, be okay with utilizing polar push cuts, kind of understand have a basic understanding of anatomy and how humans work, right? So you want to kind of understand where you want to stick this and yank it, right? Because if you're just sticking 2 inches of steel in the same place, it's not going to really do a whole lot, right? So the good side to knives this small, like I said, easy to conceal, but they're easy to carry, right? That's the big thing there. And with a single edge, with a nice penetrating point that's actually quite small, that makes the Barracuda very compatible with travel. That's another great thing about the Barracuda, in my opinion. is that this thing is compatible with more states than a lot of other fixed blades, right? And so what's the relevancy to me there, right, is that you can have a bunch of knives for a bunch of different states, right? And that's fine, right? If you're a weapons master, if you feel like that's your thing, and you have the time and the bandwidth to do that, to train with a different bunch of different weapon systems, I think that's great. But if you're like, hey, I travel, between these states pretty frequently, I know they have XYZ knife laws. The Barracuda fits all of these states' knife laws. I could just use the Barracuda and train with the Barracuda, and I'll have something that I could bring with me wherever I go, and I'll have a high degree of proficiency with this knife, right? Because it's a knife that is safe to take in a lot of different places due to, right, length of blade, fact that it's single edge, right? Now, it really depends on, I guess, your understanding of weaponry. If you were to hand me this knife, I would say this is unmistakably a weapon. I look at how fine this blade is and how aggressive that point is, and I go, this is for cutting flesh. This is a fighting knife. I don't know. I haven't actually asked a lot of people how the Barracuda looks in terms of how it presents itself as a tool. Obviously, all knives are multi-purpose, right? So I live in a state, for example, where it matters. Like the intent of the knife matters, right? Now, this knife can serve a variety of different purposes. I think it does look fairly aggressive, right? It does have a finger choil right here. It does have this diamond pattern, which I know it looks very threadbare. It looks very generic. This is like your generic diamond checkering. For whatever reason, it's actually quite grabby. The outsides don't really have any texture outside of normal G10 feel, but this diamond pattern, for whatever reason, is quite grabby. It's nice, and I like how he does his G10. It looks different than a lot of people's. So, like, I can carry this around and have a million different uses for this. Does it present kind of like a combat knife? Kind of. It is kind of an aggressive knife. But so is this, right? Depending on who you ask, one might say this is more aggressive than this one. Who knows? But it's just one more thing to think about, right? They do have some of their Shivworks has production variants that are black, which I don't think makes things better, right? I think black knives are definitely associated as being tactical. So if you're looking to avoid being associated as a weapon, that's probably not the best idea. The other great thing about them having production or cheap Chinese versions of the Barracuda is, again, you can have a number of variants of the same knife so that you're not really afraid of practicing with it, right? You can have $100 variant for high mileage stuff. You want to set up a wooden target and you want to go ham, go grab the Chinese production model, and then you can actually go and feel what hot spots are going to develop if you're fucking sewing machining people all day long in Ukraine in some trench, right? And you can do that without fear of breaking off the tip on your $350 Bantang custom, right? So I think that's really cool. They have almost like this ecosystem towards the Barracuda. There's two different sheaths. I sent Bantang a message because he has a pocket sheath and a belt sheath, and they look identical except for the hardware attachment method. So just to be sure, I sent him a message and I asked him, what's the difference between the two sheets? Is it just the hardware? But the fact that they have like three or four different Barracudas, two different sheaths, I like that because they have an ecosystem for it. They have two different trainers, I believe. But there's an ecosystem for the knife's actual usage, right? That's what I like. And that's something that I think kind of separates ShivWorks and a lot of other people, is that they have an ecosystem for their knives that's for use. It's for use, right? Not saying other people's knives don't get used, but I wish people had more thought and care into stuff like that. I wish people more often had those types of ecosystems of support for their knives, especially if they wanted to be taken seriously as a sort of high-end tool knife company. So anyway, those are my initial thoughts about the Bantang Barracuda.